Please join me now in recognizing and welcoming to the podium our honoree, Charlie Gonzalez of Texas.
Thank you very much. Please be seated, because I know Mickey prides himself on being on time on this. The first sign that you're a former member almost is when there's going to be a press conference at 2 o'clock and you didn't know about it. To Leader Pelosi, those incredible kind words, and I can't begin to tell you how much I've admired the leader. I don't think anybody ever gave Leader Pelosi the credit for leading a very diverse group of Democrats, and especially when she is Speaker. And I think history will write very, very favorably of what was accomplished under her leadership as Speaker. To Joaquin, I knew Joaquin's mother, who was a big activist for many, many years. And so, of course, she raised two young men with that kind of a social conscience and a heart to help people. So I expect great things from Joaquin, great things from Julian, and I think they're going to be the ones that will be turning Texas blue in a very short period of time. Felix didn't tell you, but we grew up in the same neighborhood, our little school, Our Lady of Sorrows. I'm obviously much older than Felix. I was even a role model to him back then, except that I was trying to teach him how to be a juvenile delinquent. But that was many years ago. So we go back, gosh, I hate to even think how long ago, but his wonderful, beautiful parents. They were just such a great family. Leonard and Lonnie was here from, of course, from Exxon. Lonnie used to practice before me when I was a district court judge, and you never know, you can't remember all the cases and how you ruled, but he's always, obviously I must have ruled in his favor because he has good memories of coming into my court. But what Leonard said was very true. So we are having a fundraiser in San Antonio, and it's for Senator Menendez. And Henry Cisneros is there, and all the state reps are there, state senators there, and they're all talking about an event. And Henry and I look at each other, and I say, hey, were you invited? And we look at each other in front of everybody there, and we go, no. And he says, man, if you think this is something, wait until you're no longer in office. So I think there's a lot of truth to what's going to happen with my invitation list. So if you have a party or something and you have an extra invitation, I'm around. To Mickey and Latino leader network, you know, this is incredible. I remember when it started, and it's just getting bigger and better. This is not a partisan effort. I know how many of us feel strongly about certain issues and such, but when it's all said and done, I think if you truly belong to the network and you're a public official, you're out there in the private sector, we all have the same goal, and that is, how do we improve the opportunities for the Latino communities throughout this country? And it's not an easy task, and there's many ways of doing it. But I wanted to touch on some things quickly. I'm going to take the prescribed amount of time, Mickey. I'm going to try to stick to this. I did prepare some remarks. And some of you may have heard me before because I spoke at the New American Alliance in Miami during the election. And I was pointing something out. And I'm hoping that it's not like Yogi Berra says, deja vu all over again. Because if you remember in July of last year with the debt ceiling, and we had we entered the agreement that finds us today at the fiscal cliff and such. So what was happening back then, people were very upset with Congress, and the Washington Post ran a poll. And the poll showed that both Democratic and Republican members of Congress had an approval rating of only 33%. And that was in July of 2011. Of course, you know, today it's much lower, but it is still in double digits, except the first digit is a 0. Other than that, we're doing great. So you would think, gosh, you guys, don't you feel terrible? Gridlock, you're not moving the country forward, and such, 33%. And we did feel kind of bad until we went and read the rest of the poll. In this poll, they also asked, if you believe in God, how do you feel about the job that God is doing? God only received a 52% approval rating. We figured we're only 19 points behind God. That's not so bad. Now, and so the new members that are coming in, you're going to find all sorts of ways to rationalize hard-headedness and gridlock in Washington. I hope that you will do a better job, and I think that you will. There is something that Mickey said I had to cover, and I do want to start off with that, and that is my own experience as a Latino elected official. But my story is so unique from almost everybody else's. Ben Ray Lujan has a similar story, but I mean, I'm not exactly the model you're going to follow because I was very fortunate in many ways. Well, first and foremost, I'm Mexican-American. Joaquin and I, and many of you. Well, this is what's amazing about all Mexican-Americans. This is the way I always try to explain it when I was at the Mexican ambassadors at the embassy one day. I said, how many Americans can say that their great-grandparents were once living in another country before living in the United States without ever having to move? And you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I was born, under race, my father put Democrat. I was born a Democrat. I wouldn't know anything else. When I say it was so unique, is that my father was Henry B. Gonzalez, and I can never recall a time that my father was not seeking election. When he retired in 1998, that was obviously the 96 election, and that was it. But he was always running for office. But I was the right age of the 8 kids, my brothers and sisters. The older ones were interested in being real teenagers. The younger ones were just too young. But I traveled with Dad when he was a state senator. As an aside, I will say it because Joaquin touched on it. This past November 6th is the first time that a Gonzalez name was not on the ballot in 60 years. Oh no, it was just, it was quite an experience in many ways. But when Dad would go to Austin, we would drive. He didn't live in Austin. It's just an hour-and-a-half drive, or back then it was an hour, and we would get there. But I saw him in the mid-50s actually filibuster for 22 hours against segregation bills, along with a fellow state senator, Chick Kaysen from Laredo. Lebanese-American, obviously being raised in Laredo, understood what discrimination was all about. But it was an amazing time, and I found such adventure and romance in what my father was doing, and he felt so incredibly strong about it, and it didn't matter what. I mean, Dad always expressed his feelings, if you remember. But I also traveled with my father, because people don't remember this. My father ran for governor around 1958. He ran for the United States Senate a couple of years later when Lyndon Johnson assumed the vice presidency. And he would drive around all over the state of Texas in this Chevrolet station wagon. And I traveled with him. And he would take 3 mariachis, my dad, a guy on a typewriter. I'm serious. That was his press guy on a little typewriter in the station wagon. And then when the mariachis would play music, I'd be there, you know, in the background with the maracas. So then I would read that Price Daniel, the governor, was traveling all over the state of Texas in an airplane. And so I would, you know, I was not a real great guy to have in that car because I'd say, Dad, I think we're going to lose. And we did. But Dad never wished for any of us to enter politics, and maybe that's a family secret, but he was not keen on any of us entering politics. The most he would say is, you know, go to law school, become a lawyer. For my sisters, and this is to all the women and young women that are here, back then, you could go to college or university, but it had to be local, and you're probably going to end up being a teacher, and that's what my sisters did. But Dad was not interested in any of us growing up to be politicians. I will tell you now that getting my father's endorsement to run in his place was the hardest endorsement I could get. There were many of running in the primary, and everybody was running pictures of themselves with my father. No, that was the absolute truth, because he knew everybody, and they had pictures with him, and they had professional relationships. Finally, I said, Dad, I mean, you're going to have to come. People are asking, why aren't you endorsing me? He said, well, you got to do this on your own. Because he always believed that. You got to do everything on your own. You got to do everything on your own. Finally, thank God for my mother. She finally convinced my father that maybe it'd be a little odd if you didn't endorse your son. So that's what happened, and it was wonderful. But my parents raised all of us to be very independent thinkers, and that, obviously, you know that my voting record wasn't always like my dad's record, and that disappointed some and made others very happy. But, I mean, the whole thing was he raised us to basically look at the facts and figures, make a determination, make a judgment, make a decision, and move forward. Now, I always tell politically aspiring Latinas and Latinos that we all can't have a Henry B. Gonzalez as a father, but we can all have a Henry B. Gonzalez as a model to encourage and inspire us as public servants. And I think that is going to be a wonderful example forever when it comes to that. I want to touch on Latinos today. I'm not going to make this a real partisan issue, and I may say some things that I think Democrats are going to say, what are you talking about? But what happened on November 6th? You've heard often enough by the pundits that demography is destiny. Now, last week's elections only began to tell the story. We do know that the Hispanic population grew by 43% in the last decade to 50.5 million. That 47.1% of the United States population that was foreign-born is Hispanic. This population growth accounted for 56% of our nation's population growth. And Janet knows these numbers and figures. 16.7% of U.S. population is Latino. By 2050, our population will grow to 132 or 33 million, or 30% of the United States population. 1 out of every 4 counties in the United States doubled their Hispanic population since the year 2000. 1 in 5 school children is Hispanic. 92% of Hispanics under the age of 18 are United States citizens. 50,000 Hispanics turn 18 every month. For how many years? 25 years. 50.4% of children younger than 1 year of age were Hispanic, Black, Asian American, or another minority group. Non-Hispanic whites will be outnumbered in the United States by 2042. The median age for whites is 42. 42, at the age of 42, your prime childbearing years are past. For Blacks and Asian Americans, the median age is in the 30s. For Hispanics, it is 28. 4/5 of seniors are white. Kenneth Johnson of the University of New Hampshire said it this way: the population is literally changing before us. With the youngest replacing the oldest, this is the first tipping point. The kids are in the vanguard of the change that's coming. What about the Latino vote? Now, we've reached the numbers where we can determine elections throughout our nation, including the presidency. Through participation in the political process, Hispanics can shape public policy. The only question is whether Hispanics can and will participate in the electoral process to the extent necessary to influence policy making. Factors that will determine that. 1 is beyond anyone's control. 1 is self-imposed. 1 is external, and one more may be awaiting us in the near future. The factor that is beyond anyone's control, but time will take care of it. We are a very young aged population, not voting age. Anybody that's out there, Adrian Sines is here, Michelle would know what I'm talking about. And of course, not all Latinos are citizens. But given time and given the right kind of legislation, you'll see even greater empowerment. Now, the factor within our control is registration and voting. And we will look carefully at the analysis of the November 6th election. But we already know that in Florida, 3 out of 5 Latinos voted for President Obama. That Ted Cruz, the newly elected senator, Republican senator from Texas, only received 35% of the Latino vote in Texas. And overall, President Obama nationally received 70% plus of the Latino vote. If we had 23 million Hispanics eligible to vote on November 6th, how many were registered and how many voted? I'm afraid that once again, Latinos did not come close to flexing their potential electoral muscle. Now, the external forces, the ones that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus have been dedicated, along with the other minority caucuses, in combating. And to the new members, please know that this is an ongoing effort and demands all of your attention. Throughout our nation's history, the ability to exercise one's vote has been denied based on various reasons. But in the final analysis, it is to deny those citizens social and economic mobility, which is seen as a threat to the status quo. Literacy tests and poll taxes were imposed in the name of maintaining the integrity of the electoral process. Of course, we know the intended purpose was to suppress or depress voter participation by a select group of voters. Today, it may be by different means, but it is to achieve the same end. And they come disguised as the following: redistricting, limiting voter registration, purging voter registration rolls, reducing early voting days and hours, and the photo ID. The last factor, and hopefully it's not awaiting us, but I think it will be immigration reform without a pathway to citizenship, because you can already hear it. We may be, the compromise being, we may think of some sort of status, legal status. They're not talking about citizenship. It will be the first time in the United States history, I believe, where you have someone that will not be afforded a pathway to citizenship. Stephen King, you know Steve King, the congressman that is so anti-immigrant. The reason that they view a pathway to citizenship is because he believes that all those undocumented immigrants are no more than undocumented Democrats. And that is quite sad. And this is where I would say that I have a Republican Party that is tone deaf to the demographics and the emerging population of Latinos in this country is a disservice to us all, even as Democrats, but especially as Americans. You need two healthy, robust, functioning political parties. You don't win on the weakness of another party. You win because your ideas and your effort are superior to the other good ideas of the opposing party. Maria Anglin is a writer in San Antonio, and this is what she wrote. And I thought it was the most profound thing said. Who were the biggest losers on November 6th? The biggest loser was the conservative Latino voter who didn't want to be represented by Democrats, but who wouldn't be represented by Republicans. I thought it was just the most profound sentence that appeared in everything, and it was a local writer. Now, what are we going to do? Because there's something else happening. You have people that will say, we are now going to deny birthright citizenship. No pathway to citizenship, deny birthright citizenship, and it's all because of Latinos and the perceived threat that we pose to the American way of life, which is totally ridiculous, and you know that, but that's where we are. Now, there are two perspectives, and as I leave Congress, I'm trying to figure how do we continue to work to reconcile them. And this is where you come in, and I still will continue to be relevant, I hope, in this. What was my father doing driving that old Chevrolet station wagon all over Texas seeking public office? And this is the Latino perspective. He was seeking inclusion for Latinos and understood assimilation. Dad's colleague, the late Congressman Ed Roybal, said it best. Hispanics are not looking for special treatment or cultural separatism. They are seeking self-determination and equity. But others see it a different way. This is the other perspective. And it's not all Republicans. I think it is the extreme wing of the Republican Party, and I'll just say that it's the Tea Party, because we see it take hold of the Republican Party in Texas to the detriment of all Texans. But this is what Harold Meyerson said in the Washington Post, July 13th, 2011. You may remember it. Now, he says Republicans, but I would say some within the Republican Party, to be sure, have long waged a war on government, but only now has it become apocalyptic and total war. At its root, I suspect, is the fear and loathing that rank-and-file right-wingers feel toward what their government and their nation is inexorably becoming: multiracial, cosmopolitan, and now headed by a president who personifies those qualities. That America is also downwardly mobile is a challenge for all of us. But for the right, the anxiety that our economy understandably invokes is augmented by the politics of racial resentment and fury that the country is no longer theirs. That's not a country whose government they want to pay for. And if the apocalypse befalls us, they seem to have concluded, so much the better. No one wants to have that conversation. You remember the president said, we're going to have this discussion about race. We're going to have this discussion. No one wants to have this discussion. But I think what Mr. Meyerson pointed out is where we find ourselves today. And what we're hoping for is that the Republican Party will resist and regain control of its heart and soul and not let it be co-opted by those that truly believe that America is changing in a way that it's not their America. Regain our freedom. Go back to another time. If you remember, as Latinos are minorities, people used to say, the good old days. For some. But they're really the bad old days for us. But we're not going backwards. I believe that Latino leaders, and I'm looking at them, and what you do, Mickey, can be the conciliators. We can bridge the divide between the two perspectives. We demonstrate that we are qualified, competent, and reasonable, that Latinos are an indispensable and indivisible part of this nation, that all Americans are interconnected. We depend on one another, that a Latino's devotion and allegiance to our country is second to none, that the success of the emerging Latino population means success for everyone. And to all America that may not be Latino, may not be minority, since you will be depending on us, you must invest in us. Education, healthcare, everything. Because as our population goes, so goes America. And if we just understood that, I think we would come together. I'm going to end with some observations. 14 years in Congress, that's not long for many people, but for me, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. These are great moments, perks, and great advice, because I wanted to sort of end it on a lighter note. The great moments. A great moment was on 9/11, when Republicans and Democrats, because leadership was taken somewhere, we don't know where, but we were at the Capitol Police Station. We had no place to go. Then suddenly, spontaneously, everybody said, we're going back to the Capitol. And the police said, no, you're not going to go back to the Capitol because then you'll be gathered there. We don't want anyone to be gathered there. Things can happen still. We went. Republicans and Democrats, remember, all filled the steps of the Capitol, and we sang, God Bless America. Most moving thing. At that moment, I mean, adversity, a common enemy, and such united us. There's got to be a way to regain that spirit again. The second greatest moment for me was a no vote. Not voting to give President George W. Bush authority to invade Iraq, because I just never thought they made a convincing case. My greatest yes vote, the Affordable Care Act. We just didn't present it in a way that was acceptable and allowed some to distort it. It really was healthcare insurance reform, where we spread risk and make the product more affordable so that pre-existing conditions can be covered. So maybe someone can cover you for more than a year, but you got to spread the risk. Perks of being a member of Congress. Having primo parking space. Now, too bad I didn't own a car. So to the members that are coming in, racking up thousands of frequent flyer miles. Too bad I had no time to use them, but maybe I will now. The best one, and this is so shallow of me, but I'm guilty. Getting to meet Paul McCartney. I'm serious. You think I'm kidding? It was the Paul McCartney. And having a picture right next to Paul McCartney. And at his age, which he's not that much older than I am, but he looks a lot better. All right, for the new members, if you're still here, This is the best advice and lessons I ever got. One is going to be quite serious, but I'm going to save that to the end. The first one is Congressman Ed Markey's model for questioning a witness at a hearing. Make sure the answer you want is included in your question. It works every time. Next, Barney Frank's advice. Now listen carefully to you guys are coming in, you got to listen to this. Never write when you can talk. Never talk when you can nod. Never nod when you can wink. That's good advice, especially given the recent headlines and the use of the internet. The most serious of all advice, but I would say this, whether it's Ruben, Silver, Solomon, anybody, and to the new members, and especially Joaquin, was the Gephardt rule. When I got here, we had freshman orientation, and Dick Gephardt was the minority leader, and he says, I'm going to give you advice that it's going to make my job a lot harder to be your leader, but it's the right advice. And it'll make your time here in Congress worthwhile. And you'll never look back with any regret. When you take your voting card out on the floor, vote your conscience first. Vote your district second, because no one else represents your district. And vote your party last. And Leader Gephardt really meant that. He truly meant that. And things have changed drastically. I know we've got things reversed. To my colleagues, to my great staff, to my dear family that I've neglected for so many years, and to all of you who have played a role as advocates, who have shared a love and respect for the institution of Congress and its essential role in having the voices of all Americans heard, I say from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and siempre adelante. Thank you.